have been home brewing since January of this year. I'm going to go over the process of your basic brewing day. You start off by having a bunch of equipment that's necessary. Instead of going through all the stuff you need, I would go to your local brew store. In addition to the equipment kit that you need, you can also buy a brew kit, and a brew kit is just everything for the beer that you need for the actual brew day, other than the equipment. It's pretty simple. It's going to consist of dried malt extract, possibly liquid malt extract, hops, yeast that you need, and priming sugar and bottle caps. Basically, the process that this particular one went through, which is pretty standard, is you start off by heating up water in your stock pot or kettle. It'll give you a recommendation on what temperature to use. You'll take your grains and you put them in a small bag, and just like a tea, you'll actually just steep it in there, generally for anywhere between half an hour to an hour. The recipe will tell you which. Once that's done, you then boil the water. The reason you boil water at this point is just to sanitize it after having the grains in there. Once the boil is finished, then take the kettle off the stove and actually start adding the malt extract. When you do this, you don't want to have heat on because a hot break can occur, and this is when the proteins kind of activate and go crazy. They'll foam up, and you have the risk of it actually boiling over. So once you've added all your malt extract in, you want to stir it really well so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot and kind of burn onto there. Once you get it all in and nice and stirred through, you're going to take your pot, put it back, and get up to boiling. Now, when it gets up to the boiling temperature, it will have a hot break, and you'll want to take it off the stove right away or turn off the burner. At this point, you let it settle down, stir it a little bit, let it cool off, and then once it's calm, put it back on the stove and heat it back up again. You may have to do that process a few times. It's different every time, but once you get to the point where you can do a continuous boil, then it's time to add your hops. The recipe will call it when to add the hops. Most of them will start at the beginning of a 60-minute boil, and that will be purely for bittering. Once you've boiled the mixture of malt extract and hops for an hour, and this is actually called the wort at this point, that sugary mixture with the hops, you need to cool the wort as soon as possible. The reason you need to cool it is that the hot temperature makes the wort really susceptible to bad microorganisms that you don't want to be in the brew and can affect the flavor. There are a bunch of different ways you can do cooling. If you're a beginning brewer, I would do a ice bath where you actually take out your kettle and put it into a body of water with ice in it and just stir both the wort inside the kettle and the water around it. That way you don't have hot and cold spots. You'll be continuously interacting the two different temperatures for the maximum efficiency. Once you've got the wort down to room temperature, remove it and put it into your primary fermenter. Most beginning kits, it's going to be a plastic bucket. Since you did a partial boil, you will add an additional water to get up to your 5-gallon batch capacity, assuming that's the batch you're going to do, which most brew kits are set up for. At this point, if you have a hydrometer, I would recommend taking hydrometer reading. The reason you're doing this is to get the specific gravity. This is helpful just for records keeping, but also lets you know how well the beer is fermented. So you'll have a starting gravity which is kind of high, and then you'll take another gravity reading when you're done with the fermenting process, which will be about 75% of the value. You'll want to aerate your wort. So if you poured your wort into the fermenter vigorously, that should be enough to aerate it. If not, you can kind of pour it back and forth between your bucket and your kettle until you feel that it really has a lot of oxygen in it. The reason you're doing this is to help the yeast because they need a lot of oxygen in their beginning stages. Once the wort is aerated, then you'll add the yeast and cover it up. You want to keep your fermenter sealed and tight so nothing else can get in, and also put an airlock on top of it. An airlock is just going to be a little plastic piece that has water in it. The reason why you start off with a bucket fermenter to begin with is because you don't want light to be hitting your beer. The primary fermentation process, after you've done and added the yeast, you just put it away and wait for about a week. You'll know when it's done by checking this specific gravity, which the recipe will tell you what the ending specific gravity is. Once that's done, you have a choice. You can either transfer it to bottles and actually bottle, or you can transfer it to a secondary fermenter. But after you bottle and put the sugar in there, you have to wait 3 weeks for it to actually carbonate. Generally, you want to leave the bottles around room temperature for the best carbonation. And then, after that, pop her open and enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers.